Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Temco and this is Secret World Legends, the re-release of the free-to-play model of the Secret World. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what the Secret World is, it's basically an MMO. It's an MMO set in a very unique setting indeed, with sort of a mystery and horror atmosphere that does things very different from most other MMOs. Sadly for the Secret World, when it was launched in 2012, it flopped quite a bit. It didn't really get the sales it needed. It didn't really get the major appeal they were looking for. And for the last couple of years, the game has puttered on, more or less supported by a niche audience that really loves it, because there is a lot to love in this game. But Funcom, in their infinite wisdom, have decided this game, like their other MMO titles, is gonna go for the free-to-play transition. But unlike some of their other titles, they appear to be doing this slightly different. Instead of reimagining as a full-scale MMO, they're sort of going with shared world RPG, because, quite frankly, most of this game revolves around story content, story-based focus, investigation missions, deep, rich dialogue, figuring out puzzles, all this sort of cool and amazingly intricate stuff. That requires time, that requires attention, and it also has a high production cost associated with it. So they're going with less of an MMO, probably to save on server cost on one end, maybe to introduce something slightly different in terms of allowing more niche content to be created, not having to take care so much for open world content, and focus more on small group and single player focus. All in all, nothing I can complain about too much. These all seem like very noble goals to strive towards. But will they succeed? Well, is Secret World Legends, now it's coming into free to play, worth your time? So what they have done is they have changed a couple of things in the Secret World Legends, primarily to, one, allow accessibility and appeal to an audience that has not played the game before. So an audience may be struggling with understanding the game initially when it was the Secret World. And what they've done is also added a couple of interesting things in terms of progression and sort of made it more like other MMO titles that feel very familiar to people. And you might be wondering, what have they done then? Well, the Secret World never actually had levels. It was never a game that you logged in and you were level 50 and you did that dungeon because you were now level 50 and you could do that dungeon. But the game always did have a very distinct leveling curve. It's not like the game never had any way of doing anything. You were still leveling up, you were still gaining skills, you were still exploring options, you were still using items, you were still building your build. But for many players, that was very confusing. So in comes the new system. The new system is threefold. Unlike the previous system, where you had a big wheel going around and you had to select between all these various swords and hammers and melee and chaos and elementalism and all these other sub-skills and sub-abilities that you weren't really sure what they did in various different schools and sub-schools, etc. It was fairly complex, and even if you knew what you were doing, getting a build out of these hundreds of abilities down to 7 active abilities and 7 passive abilities was a bit of a mess in figuring out what you need to do. Especially as a new player or a more casual player, you probably ended up with a shitty build that didn't work. In result of that, you ended up having much less fun. Secret World Legends, they've turned that around. They've gone with a much more simplified and much more direct approach. When you create a character, you pick a starting class. In this case, I have chosen to be a magician, so I have chaos magic as well as elementalism. That means I just do a ton of damage, both in close combat as well as in ranged combat, but I am also very squishy. If you want to go with a ninja or a healer or some other base class, and I say class, but I'll get into that in a little bit, you do so at the start, and the game sort of introduces you to your abilities and what sort of character you'll be playing. A melee-based character, a range-based character, DPS-based, control-based, tanking or healing-based, and these variety of roles that you, as a new player or someone that plays MMOs, are more familiar with. But that has also resulted in a very big change indeed in the way you level up your abilities, the way you unlock your skills. You still get your ability points and your ability skills. You have your active abilities and your passive abilities. Pretty straightforward. You still use these to unlock skills, but instead of now having a big wheel with tons of skills, it's much more stripped down, it's much more simplified, it's also more streamlined. All abilities are useful now, they all interact much more efficiently. You actually have abilities such as collapse that follow up on one another, and they do very different things, but they sort of flow together in the same general school with the same sort of synergies you might expect. So if you have active abilities, such as my distortion here, If I go to passive, I'm gonna have an ability that functions with that distortion, and you can instantly see it and know if I go further into this path with contradiction and mass evolution, I will expectedly get those skills and abilities that help me out further. Other than that, you also have these passive abilities, you unlock them, and you get forward. Much more simplified in one way, and I don't mean that in a negative manner at all. The simplification allows for streamlining, and this streamlining allows for more fun, because it's not fun to figure out what you should click on, it's fun to use those abilities to blow up enemies. So that's the skill system, and you still have all the various schools, and unlike previously where you got access to all the schools directly, you now unlock these schools. So if I wanted to use swords, I'd have to figure something out. I can either buy it with 20,000 of these points, these ability points, or I can use it with the premium currency. And if I do so, I get access to this school. Very straightforward. I can read the abilities beforehand, and that is that. Now, later down the line, you're going to have all these extra abilities available to you. Not to worry at all. But early on, this one allows Funcom to get a couple of bucks here and there on players that want to unlock things earlier. Sort of pay-to-skip based free-to-play model, which is definitely what they're going for. Consumables as well as skipping stuff. And then you have the people that want to hang out, love with their characters, and then branch out with different skill trees. They've decided what they want to be, but later down the line, they want to try different things. Much like Final Fantasy XIV sort of does it in a similar notion. So there is that. Beyond these abilities, you can unlock them all eventually. Obviously, you have your skill trees and you still have your active abilities. The biggest change in terms of skills and leveling is also how you use your various skills and abilities, because the game is now based around an action combat system. Whereas the game previously used a tab targeting system with several abilities and you having sort of figure out how to use synergy on your own, now each character uses a much more direct method of combat. And this method is actually fairly cool. It is really well put together. You target using the mouse, you can use Alt to switch to a mouse interaction mode if you want to read something or talk to a character or something similar. As you move forward through the various bits and pieces of the game, you also notice that each of these special new combat mechanics that you use with Q1, 2, and E, and you can rebind that, also have your passive abilities, which you can, as previously, still use the same way. You can now also have secondary mechanics to each of these abilities. I say can, but you just have those secondary mechanics whether you want them or not. The base result is that, for example, Elementalism has a overheating mechanic, and this is not a new mechanic. World of Warcraft has a similar mechanic, and many other games have similar mechanics for this sort of skill. The base idea is that because of this extra mechanic, there's a little bit more depth, a little bit more complexity, a little bit more added thought into just using abilities and not just triggering one ability over and over again. You want to get a balanced build. This build is balanced between Elementalism, which is large explosive amounts of damage, but they overheat really fast, so that means I will suddenly drop in damage, coupled with Chaos, which is short range pulsing damage that has both a charge down and a charge up. Obviously, these would only be determinants if they were not tied into something cool as well. So as you increase your overheat meter on Elementalism, your spells get more powerful. So it's a matter of balancing it, not just making sure it doesn't overheat. Pretty good, especially in dungeon-based combat and longer encounters such as boss fights. But the thing with Chaos is that if you get a charge and you build up your entire meter here, for Chaos, you will get a random powerful attack that it does on an enemy. Obviously, because you can't really control Chaos, that's sort of the point, it's much more interesting to manage when you're gonna trigger that special extra ability. Are you gonna time it with other characters in your party being available to use those various different abilities? And in that case, are you going to be the one that allows yourself to, time it out, lower your damage output initially, maybe increase your damage output somewhere? It's up to you, but the fact that you need to manage all of these things now is a very good addition to Secret World Legends. Now that said, there is another part here that is fairly important to remember. Secret World's biggest weakness in terms of its overall architecture and game design was its combat system. And sadly, even with the addition of this new action-based combat mechanic system, I'm still not the greatest fan of combat interaction in Secret World Legends. This comes down to two parts. One is that the abilities are still very trigger happy. I still don't have a great sense of them. And even using and spamming my buttons down, it still feels like I'm just using 1112222 1112222. I don't really feel like I'm actively combating with abilities, and this is integrated into the way the game mechanics work. It's not like suddenly I have a gun and I have to use it as an FPS would. It's still an active triggering ability. I still don't have to aim, it's still targeted abilities. And yes, you have AoE abilities and all the like, but that really doesn't change the underlying principles of the game. It's not the end of the world, but it's just something I am a great fan of. But for me personally, the Secret World, and now Secret World Legends, has never been about combat mechanics. It's been about questing, it's been about progression, it's been about experiencing the story. And while all the various quests and side quests and story dialogues and mysterious things were very cool and very unique, and I enjoyed all of them, the game was always a little bit of a mess in terms of gameplay cohesion, especially in the later stages, once you go into Egypt and once you go into the desert area. A lot of the game loses focus on what it tries to convey in terms of story. There's so many side objectives and so many false paths and wrong turns you can take and do with so many factions vying for your attention that you sort of lose track of what the hell is going on. Thankfully, Secret World Legends, again, we come back to the accessibility part and the part of trying to get new players interested into the game. It's much more streamlined. Even going from Kingsmouth, where you start out initially with the little town here, it is a lot more focused in where the game sends you. The main quest, the overarching quest, now has actual progression tracking, where it says, hey, hold on, you might want to do some other quests here and there in this area before you progress to the next part, because this is a shift in difficulty. The leveling system that still awards you spell points and ability points is now also tied into an actual level number, so you have a quick indication into what the hell is going on in terms of your character. You can see this character is level 11 now. This allows you for full control into seeing what you are and how you stand against enemies, something the Secret World sorely lacked. So, to bring it all together in terms of gameplay and progression, the combat system is much more dynamic, has more depth to it in terms of the secondary mechanics between elementalism and chaos in this case, and every other weapon type, from swords, charge up and discharge abilities and everything related to that, all the way down to fist fighting. But the secondary thing is that they've also streamlined the leveling process, with actual levels now. That's sort of just a magic number indicator, and they don't restrict you in any real way, but they allow you to sort of easily see whether or not you're maybe a little bit low on certain content. Another thing they have redesigned is the crafting system. Previously, a very Minecraft-esque crafting system was in place for the Secret World. That is gone, that is fully destroyed, that will not come back, thank God. A new system called the upgrade system is in place, where you can grab a piece of gear, dump it in the upgrade mechanic, and then look at upgrading it using different other items you find. If you have one of the same type, you get a bonus. This upgrade then levels up, gains a bit of a boost, and then you get extra stats on that item. This goes for all various trinkets and equipment pieces you can find. Pretty straightforward. It's much more simplified. It still costs you the scrap points, whatever they might be, and you end up with items that are leveled up and level with you as you progress. So junk loot, you can decide to sell to a vendor, you can decide to use it to level up, and you have to balance this for yourself how you deem fit. It's a nice change from the overly complicated crafting system into this very simple system. It does lose some of its charm though. The crafting system used to be much more interesting in terms of what it expected you to do, in terms of what you need to know, how you got those recipes, how you figured out how things need to be combined. It had a lot more involvement. In this case, you just open up a window, dump some stuff in it, and bam bam, thank you ma'am, here you go, an upgraded item. Now, talking about items is something I am very much not happy with in terms of Secret World Legends. In the Secret World, once you started, you got all these various trinkets. You got your focuses for your combat, you got your swords for your sword wielding, your shotguns for your shotgun wielding, your helm trinkets, your waistbands and your bracelets and your necklaces and talismans and medallions and what will you not. And you got all of them for every slot. Now, in Secret World Legends, in this first area, you're only gonna get a neck item or a waist item, and there are only gonna be about 3 or 4 different variants of them available, one for each character archetype: DPS, control, healing, and tanking. And that's it. You can upgrade them, and you can find many of them, but they will be only those, and that is not cool. Limiting gear in this fashion is a detriment to the game, in my opinion, to an immense degree. A major part of MMOs is getting gear, is getting that shiny loot, letting that ding on level up, getting that extra ability. And while you get that ding on level up, you get that extra ability point, and you can unlock some new cool stuff here and there to do. Getting gear is severely lacking while you're leveling, because gear is still a very major part of the game. But because of the rebalance and the way they streamline some of the questing to be more in line, to allow for smoother flow into transitioning between regions and zones, they've also rebalanced items, and they've basically removed items in the first 2 zones, or 3 zones I should say, before you head on to the next segment, and then you have a full set of items. I really dislike this system because you'll end up with having 2 items, doing all the quests, and your quest reward is basically, well, here, have another necklace, or here, have another belt. Yippee-yay for you. Good luck. It really removes some of the interesting design choices and aesthetic choices you can make as well in terms of building your character. Now we get to the meat of the game, aesthetics. There's 2 main parts to aesthetics in Secret World, and those same parts are still available in Secret World Legends. A game that never did gear in terms of armor pieces. It never did gear in terms of you being this sort of force that had to run around with shoulder pads bigger than their head. You were in regular clothing. You were your average Joe, except you had fists of lightning to wield powers beyond your ken. It's still that way. You can still do it that way, but the dressing room has been changed. Previous gear sets that you had, and you could mix and match gear bits with object bits and different sets of abilities, is gone. That may come back later down the line, but for now we only have the dressing room where you can pick the item you want, scroll down to the list of available items, select the item you want. You can even preview that item if you are so inclined. There we go. Look how beautiful this pumpkin head is. And then you can either purchase that item or not. If you want to purchase it, there's 3 ways of getting an item. Obviously get it as a quest reward, or you unlock it as a achievement benefit. As you can see, this chest piece here, these eye pieces here, I think these are a helmet, mouthpiece, there you go, is unlocked using a achievement. That's a hidden achievement. I don't know what it is, but once I get that achievement, I will unlock this item. Other items such as the athletic headband. So let me grab this. There you go. An athletic headband, which still has a placeholder graphic, can be purchased for 100 gold bars. These you buy using real currency. This is the free-to-play aspect of the game. The Arum, or the gold bars, how you want to call them, costs you about 500 Arum for $4.99. That means this little headband is going to cost you about €1 or regional equivalency. I'm assuming they're going to use euro to dollar because that is the vogue thing to do. Obviously, buying larger quantities means you get a bigger bonus, but that is always up to you. The third way to unlock various items is using Patreon points, and you get these by using a variety of things, from quests to doing trading to doing a bunch of other stuff. You get these using a variety of means and methods, and you can unlock a bunch of stuff that way. So that is basically the free-to-play model. All content is available and fully free to play, but unlocking more character slots, unlocking more different class abilities faster, that is, and the ability to get cosmetic items is tied into the payment system and behind a paywall. One thing of note and concern to me is the fact that the only way to purchase ARM is using a credit card. I do hope they add PayPal or something similar to that to the system, because not everybody, obviously in Europe especially, uses a credit card, but maybe I'm in the minority here. I just prefer using different systems to purchase things. So there's a couple of different things they could do here to improve the ease of buying this stuff that you can spend money on. Why wouldn't they want to do that? That makes no sense to me if they didn't want that. So what else is new in Secret World Legends? Well, the main things here are obviously the new player introduction systems, so a better tutorial, smoother gameplay, more lock-in into traditional game mechanics such as levels, and more traditional step-by-step questing. The simplification of the crafting system is a major one. The simplification of the leveling mechanics is a major one. You'll hear a lot of simplification and accessibility here, and that is pretty okay. I don't mind. But did they improve the game in other ways? Were you a previous player of the Secret World and were you interested in the Secret World? And were you wondering, well, should I purchase this game again? Should I go out and buy some of this ARM? Should I invest time and time again into another MMO? And the answer to that really relies on 2 major questions. The first question here is, did you enjoy the Secret World questing? Because the actual quests have not really changed. Sure, there's been minor changes here and there, and some quests are removed and some quests are moved in position, and some have been redone in terms of difficulty or the encounters you have. But in general, the quests are still the same quest. You're still going to be running around doing investigation missions. In fact, the one we're doing right now still requires you to have an intimate knowledge of the map and its goings on. You have to know what you're doing, and you're probably going to Google the answer like I've done on this quest repeatedly over the last couple of years. But that is still the Secret World. You're still going to have quests where you run out and shoot zombies in the face, or undead hordes, or demons from another plane of dimension, and you're gonna have quests where you sit down, Google your ass off to find this one biblical reference to figure out the access code to get to a secret lair of the secret dude, so you can find a little bit of context and code. That is the Secret World, and if you do not enjoy this kind of content, if you do not enjoy this Lovecraftian type of gameplay, then Secret World Legends is not going to change your mind. It's not going to add anything new or original to the game. The same quest, it's the same models, it's the same visuals, it's mostly the same performance even though they have improved that somewhat in my opinion. But the biggest thing that they've changed is the way it's accessible for newer players. Players that have never played the game. Players that were wondering about the Secret World but never got into the game in the first place. And that is a very good thing on one end, but if you're a veteran of the game, it might not be the thing that draws you in. Now, that said, there is a second part to this question. Obviously, how could there not be? The second part is whether or not you can deal with a redesigned combat system. And the reason for that is fairly straightforward. This new combat system requires a lot more movement, requires more aiming. It is less relaxed. It is less about figuring out a cool puzzle, less about moving in position. It's less traditional MMO style. It's more action-ish combat, more Age of Conan. But that also has its own disadvantages, obviously. That said, the game has a lot on offer. The introduction of the new system for viewing your character, the new way you can use your dressing room is very interesting. The fact that you have all the various things available at a fingertip is very good. The rebalanced combat interaction, the rebalanced leveling mechanics are all really good. Overall, the flow of the game in at least the first 3 zones, which is the ones I've been able to experience during this preview period for press, are very enjoyable. The areas later, I have no idea, but the story cohesion from what I've done in the Secret World compared to Secret World Legends is very excellent. All in all, if you've previously played the Secret World and you can deal with the shift in combat mechanics and you can sort of deal with the simplification of the leveling mechanic, because at the end of the line it's still going to give you the same options, they're just much more simplified in terms of how you get them, in what manner, then Secret World Legends is going to offer you enjoyable gameplay. If you're an age-old veteran of the Secret World and you've done all the content and you've been to Tokyo and you've done the layers and you've done all the special quest missions and everything related to that, then Secret World Legends is not going to offer you much unless you like to re-experience the same content, but this time with a nice little combat shell over it with better combat mechanics. Nothing wrong with that, but if that's not what you're into, that might not be something you look for. But if you're a new player, if you've never played the Secret World, if you could never get around to the game, if you could never get yourselves hooked on the game because of the combat system, because you couldn't comprehend the leveling system, because maybe, just maybe, you didn't like the way some of the questing was done, you didn't like the really hands-off and figure-it-out approach of the game yourself, then maybe you might want to take a look at Secret World Legends, because the game offers some really interesting stuff for your enjoyment. Secret World Legends is coming out for PC platform on the 26th of June. It's coming out on Steam a couple of days later in early July, and it's free to play, so you can dive in with no added cost. But obviously, if you are a previous Secret World subscriber and old veteran with an old account, you can link that to your new Secret World Legends account and get a bunch of benefits, bonuses, and boosts to start you off with in this game, because they obviously are not going to screw over their Secret World client. But that, for me personally, Secret World Legends is going to invigorate me to finally get around to doing some of those later stage dungeons, because the new combat system might actually entice me to enjoy the combat mechanics. The new smoother leveling experience and smoother combat experience might just be enough for me to go out on a limb and, well, enjoy the questing more without having to break my head when I haven't played for a couple of days and forgot where I left off. But in the end, it's still the same game, and if you loved it like I did, then you will love it now. And if you didn't love it back then, short of not loving it because of the combat mechanics, then it's not gonna make your world any different. But it's free to play now, so it's not gonna hurt you to check it out. It's still a very solid AAA developed full complete MMO experience, and it is loads of fun to blow up enemies from a different universe using magical powers or drawing their blood in or whatever else you might want to do. Secret World Legends. There's a link in the description below if you are interested in checking it out. And I thank you for watching. Press that like button if you found this video helpful, useful, and enjoyable. And if you want to see more content like this, you can press the subscribe button down below for more content like this. And if you want to support GuyLogicGaming so we can keep producing ad-free content for everyone, check us out on Patreon. We would be eternally grateful. So wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogicGaming.